Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. When we think of ancient history, we often picture magnificent ruins, the silent testament to civilizations that rose and fell. We focus on the dramatic moment of collapse. But what if the more important story isn't about how societies ended, but how they survived? A new field called post-disaster archaeology is digging through the layers of ash, floodwater silt, and plague pits to uncover an incredible narrative of human resilience. It's a story of communities that were hit by unimaginable catastrophes, yet refused to vanish. They adapted, they rebuilt, and they passed on lessons that are more relevant today than ever before. This is the story of the scars on our Earth, and how they forged the unbreakable spirit of our ancestors. To understand this, archaeologists use something called resilience theory. It's a simple but powerful idea. Instead of just asking, did they collapse? We ask, how did they absorb the shock, reorganize, and carry on? We look for clues in how they built their homes, grew their food, and even in their art and religion. Let's start with one of nature's most terrifying spectacles, the volcano. Around 1600 BCE, the Thera volcano, what we now call Santorini, erupted with a force that shook the ancient world. For decades, historians believed this explosion and the tsunamis it caused were a death blow to the sophisticated Minoan civilization on the nearby island of Crete. It was a simple, clean story of collapse, but the real story is far more complex. While the eruption was a devastating blow, Minoan society didn't just crumble. In the years that followed, they entered a period of incredible cultural renaissance. They built new, even more magnificent palaces. In fact, the period right after the Thera eruption is now considered by many to be the absolute peak of Minoan culture. They adapted. Archaeologists see evidence of their economy shifting, becoming more decentralized. Their religious practices changed too. Intriguingly, they started incorporating volcanic pumice stone into their ritual sites, as if they were trying to spiritually manage the trauma and tame the power that had torn their world apart. Ultimately, the long-term economic strain from the disaster did contribute to their eventual decline and the rise of the Mycenaeans. But their story isn't one of instant collapse. It's a story of transformation, of a society that was profoundly changed, but fought to endure. We see a similar story in a much more famous ruin, Pompeii. Buried by Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, we thought of it as a city frozen in time, completely abandoned. But recent discoveries tell a different story. For centuries after the eruption, survivors and scavengers returned to the ruins. They dug through the ash to salvage valuable materials, like marble. They repurposed the buried structures, turning the lower floors of old homes into cellars and workshops. They created, as one archaeologist put it, a favela among the ruins, carving out a life in the most devastated of landscapes. This speaks to a raw human tenacity. But how did ancient people remember these events? In modern-day Turkey, at a Neolithic site called Catalhoyuk, there's a mural painted around 6600 BCE. Some researchers are convinced it's the world's oldest depiction of a natural disaster. It shows a twin-peaked volcano, likely the nearby Hasan Dagi, erupting over a town. And geological evidence confirms that this volcano did erupt right around the time the mural was painted. If this is true, it's a profound look into the mind of our ancestors, a collective memory of terror and awe, recorded on a wall for future generations. From the fire of volcanoes, we turn to the shaking earth. Earthquakes have toppled cities for all of human history, but some cultures learned to build with the tremors, not against them. The Inca Empire, which flourished in the seismically active Andes Mountains, are the masters of this. If you visit Machu Picchu or Cusco, you'll see their legendary stonework. They used a technique called ashlar masonry, cutting massive stones so precisely that they fit together perfectly without any mortar. This wasn't just for looks. When an earthquake strikes, these walls don't crack, they move. The stones dance with the seismic waves shifting and sliding before settling right back into place. This incredible design has allowed their structures to withstand centuries of powerful earthquakes, but it wasn't just the walls. The Inca designed their buildings with trapezoidal doors and windows and slanted their walls inward, creating a wider, more stable base. Even their famous agricultural terraces weren't just for farming. They acted as massive retaining walls, preventing landslides during quakes and heavy rains. It's believed the Inca perfected these techniques after a major earthquake around the year 1450, demonstrating a remarkable ability to learn from disaster and innovate. They harnessed a deep scientific understanding of their environment to create a truly resilient society. Of course, not all disasters are sudden and violent. Some are slow, creeping threats, like changes in the climate. Ancient civilizations faced devastating floods and prolonged droughts, and their responses offer crucial lessons for us today. The Yellow River in China is often called China's sorrow because of its historically devastating floods. There is a foundational myth in Chinese culture of a hero named Yu the Great, who tamed the river's floodwaters and established China's very first dynasty, the Xia. For a long time it was just a story. But recently, archaeologists have found evidence of a truly catastrophic flood that ravaged the Yellow River Valley about 4,000 years ago, likely caused by an earthquake that created a massive landslide dam. This discovery suggests the legend of Yu the Great is rooted in a real, historical disaster. In response to this constant threat, ancient Chinese societies became masters of hydraulic engineering. As early as 500 years ago, the Liangzhu culture built one of the world's oldest and largest water management systems, with dams, levees, and canals to control floods and irrigate crops. Later dynasties built thousands of miles of levees along the Yellow River, but this is also a cautionary tale. The very levees they built to contain the river caused sediment to build up, raising the riverbed higher and higher. This meant that when a levee inevitably broke, the resulting flood was even more catastrophic. It shows a complex relationship where the solution to one problem can create new vulnerabilities down the line. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloan people faced the opposite problem: severe and prolonged drought. For centuries, they thrived in this arid landscape by becoming experts in water conservation. They built terraces, check dams, and reservoirs to capture every drop of rain. They planted different types of crops in different locations to avoid a total loss if one area failed. They bred drought-resistant varieties of maize, beans, and squash. One of their most ingenious adaptations was discovered in a cave in New Mexico. Archaeologists found evidence that the ancestral Puebloans were harvesting ice from deep inside lava tubes, then using fire to melt it for drinking water during the driest times. It's an amazing example of their intimate knowledge of the land. Ultimately, the megadrought in the late 13th century proved to be too much. The great settlements at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon were abandoned. But again, this isn't a story of collapse and disappearance. The ancestral Puebloan people migrated to areas with more reliable water, like the Rio Grande Valley. Their descendants are the Pueblo people who live there today. Their story is one of adaptation, and finally, relocation in the face of an insurmountable challenge. We see a similar story of climate adaptation on the coast of Tanzania, at the ruins of a great Swahili port city called Kilwa Kisiwani. For centuries, it was a major hub of trade in the Indian Ocean, but its people had to deal with a constantly changing coastline, with rising sea levels and erosion threatening their homes and mosques. In response, they built protective seawalls, but more impressively, they harnessed nature itself, planting dense mangrove forests along the coast to absorb the energy of the waves and protect the city. Their proactive, community-led efforts were so successful that the site was removed from the UNESCO World Heritage in Danger list in 2014, a powerful example of adapting to long-term change. Perhaps the most terrifying disasters are the ones you can't see. Pandemics have swept across human history, leaving a trail of devastation and profoundly altering the course of civilizations. The Black Death in the 14th century killed up to half of Europe's population. The plague of Justinian in the 6th century had a similarly devastating impact on the Byzantine Empire. The suffering was immense. Economies collapsed, trade halted, and society was thrown into chaos. But these plagues also triggered massive long-term change. In Europe, the catastrophic labor shortage meant peasants could demand better wages and more freedom, leading to the collapse of the old feudal system. The Black Death is often credited with helping to end the Middle Ages and spark the Renaissance. The need to replace human labor spurred technological innovation. The old ways of thinking were shattered, leading to new universities and a more scientific approach to medicine. It's a strange paradox. The archaeological record shows mass graves and suffering, but skeletal remains from the period after the Black Death show that the survivors were often healthier, as there was more food and fewer people competing for resources. It was a societal reset, born from tragedy. Similarly, the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century Roman Empire weakened the military and destabilized the economy. The massive loss of life is thought to have fueled the rise of new religions, especially Christianity, which offered solace, community, and answers in a world filled with fear and uncertainty. Sometimes, all of these disasters can hit at once. Around 1200 BCE, a perfect storm of earthquakes, drought, famine, and invasions struck the interconnected civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean. This is known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Great powers like the Mycenaeans in Greece and the Hittites in Anatolia completely fell apart. But once again, it wasn't a total apocalypse. It was a story of varying degrees of collapse and resilience. While some societies disappeared, others, like the Assyrians, weathered the storm. And in the vacuum left by the fallen empires, new things grew. The period after the Mycenaeans fell is known as the Greek Dark Ages. But out of those ashes rose the polis or city-state, which became the foundation of classical Greek civilization. The collapse also forced innovation. Bronze, which required long-distance trade for its components, became scarce. So societies turned to a more widely available material: iron. The Iron Age was born from the ashes of the Bronze Age, revolutionizing farming and warfare. The Late Bronze Age collapse shows how a confluence of crises can bring a whole system down. But it also shows the incredible human capacity to reorganize and innovate, paving the way for a new world. So what can we take away from these stories etched in dust and stone? The study of ancient disasters offers more than just fascinating history. It offers profound lessons for our own time. As we face the challenges of climate change, new pandemics, and other global crises, the archaeological record provides a long-term perspective. It shows us that human societies have a remarkable track record of adapting to even the most extreme environmental shifts. The dancing stones of the Inca, the hydraulic engineering of ancient China, and the coastal management of Kilwa Kisiwani are all testaments to a deep well of human ingenuity. But these stories also offer cautionary tales. They remind us that resilience has its limits. They show us that sometimes our solutions can create new problems, like the levees on the Yellow River. Perhaps the most important lesson, though, is one of hope. It is the story of our ancestors, who faced unimaginable horrors and still found ways to survive, to rebuild, and to create new futures from the rubble of the old. Their stories echo through the millennia, a powerful testament to the importance of community, the power of innovation, and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for listening to G Fun Facts Online.